from Pretoria. Is everything all right? People talk or say things.
Hello?
Why didn't you tell me it was out of order? I suppose you think that's funny.
I'm not allowed out the front door.
Who says you weren't?
Them.
Who?
Them.
It was terrible out there. I could hear breathing.
We told you.
Are you worried about the man?
They hate us. That's the truth. They want to kill and torture every one of us. You can see it in their eyes.
Come now, Frederick. Do you dream about unholy things?
I really don't like what's going on here. There's something wrong, and that's a fact.
Wait. What did you dream last night? This manifestation of evil. You must be delivered from evil.
Brown-haired albino was unbuttoning his coat, his eyes on Cermak, who was shaking hands with Roosevelt.
Well, it's wonderful to see you, Tony. A lovely gesture.
I just wanted to remind you and your administration that you have my full and enthusiastic support.
The albino assassin was reaching under his coat, but I grabbed his arm and pulled it away, and his hand came back empty, the gun still under his arm as his coat flapped. I buried a fist in his belly and doubled him over. And when he came up, the snout of my 9mm stared him in the face.
You got you this time, fucker!
Sounded like firecrackers, and the muzzle flash above the crowd looked like fireworks, but this was something else. Blurred figures in the crowd were falling, and a stubby, bushy-haired brown little man in a white shirt standing up on a bench was swarmed like a come-to-Jesus meeting got out of hand. Meanwhile, the ex-blonde was pulling away, and I swung at him, and he went down, unconscious, as the mass of people around us were heading to my right. I moved against the tide towards Cermak, pushing, shoving, and got to that touring car where Miller and Lang were crouched over the fallen Cermak, red spreading from his left side under his unbuttoned suit coat.
Where? Where were the goddamn bodyguards?
I had the blonde, Your Honor. He didn't fire the round. Some bushy-haired little creep.
This was no time to tell him he'd been shot by his son-in-law's gardener.
What the hell? They got me after all, Heller.
The crowd was turning into a mob. Miller, Lang, and I were hovering over Cermak in the quiet of the storm.
Heller, get your people out of the way. We need to move the president and his vehicle out of here. For Christ's sakes, Cermak's been shot. Take him with you. Get him to a hospital.
Roosevelt, sitting in back, heard me.
Put Tony in here and get us the hell out.
The shooter's big revolver was clicking on an empty chamber now. But that must have had an 8-round rod, as I found myself on a battlefield where bleeding audience members wandered like wounded warriors, helped by their dazed loved ones.
Although edited for television, tonight's thriller contains scenes of suspense and violence which may be unsuitable for young viewers. Parental discretion is advised.
Robservations with Robert Burnett.
Well, greetings, imagination connoisseurs. Once again, it is I, your Duke of Dope Discourse, your master of fun and wonder, your viceroy of verisimilitude, your sommelier of sci-fi and cinema, your evangelist of the imagination, and of course, perhaps the never-to-be-defined existential Mr. Rogers. That's right, moi. Moi? Moi. Robert Meyer Burnett, and I'm, of course, Robcasting you from right here in the Robservatory. You imagination connoisseurs, you members of this, the Post-Geek Singularity community. This is Robservations episode number 1058. 1058. Wow, that's a lot. You know, I just realized I wanted to respond to a comment on the last Robservations, and I was pulling up letters and everything else, but I forgot to go and get the comment that I wanted to respond to because it is a common comment. I like it when people take me to task and make me have to explain myself. And I love it when people give me an opening to do so. I feel like, yeah, thanks for that. I appreciate it. So I'm going to see if I can find this comment, and I wanted to, to respond to it. And there's a lot of people, actually, I have to figure out, let's see, I've got to look at the newest first. But it's always interesting to me when, like, I love discussion. I love when people are bubbling forth with their ideas after watching a show, which I really like. But it's interesting when people like come after you. But when they come after me, I always kind of find it strange when they make assertions against me, and I feel like I understand what you're saying, but it seems to me you aren't paying attention as to what I've said about this particular subject. So that's why I wanted to read this article, and I'm just looking for it as I'm scrolling down. As you can see, I'm somewhat distracted. I'm not my usual focused self because I can't find the. I'm scrolling down and I'm looking for this, but I can't find it. And I'm looking for it. Oh well, I'll have to come back. I don't want to sit there and make you watch me look for this article because that's boring. Anyway. So, last night, I was watching Captain America the Winter Soldier, as one does, and obviously I think it's generally considered, history has decided for us. I mean, by the way, here's another thing. There is I notice a lot of a school of thought amongst, I guess I would call it younger viewers. I mean, let's face it, I would say that I'm one of the oldest pundits on YouTube. What that says about me, I don't know. A lot of people use it as a way to attack me. What are you doing? Don't you have better things to do? Is this where your career led you? Like me and Paul Shadow. But I do this for fun. This is like I'm either going to be watching a movie, reading a book, building a model spaceship, of which I was doing earlier. Actually, not a model spaceship, but a vehicle, a sci-fi vehicle. Or I'm doing this. Or working on a project. I'm doing something. This kind of keeps me going. It keeps me in touch with, to be honest, my fandom. And to have this opportunity is fun. And since I've been going to conventions my whole life. But I can see that a lot of people are like, well, don't you have... I am no captain of industry, let me tell you. So that's okay. But anyway, so last night I was watching The Winter Soldier. And I hadn't seen it in a while. And it was just, I was waiting to do something else. I just needed a breather. I was eating some food, hanging out with the dogs. And I was just looking stuff. I find that I watch movies I really like over and over again. Sometimes as a film editor, I've told people this before, but I will watch movies with the sound off and just concentrate on the film editing. I really think that one of the ways as a film editor, I don't know if any other film editors do this, but part of my process when I'm editing is I watch things silently to see if the edits work, just from a purely visual standpoint, because you can use sound to caress your edits and make them better. Whether you lead dialogue by a couple of frames or trail dialogue by a couple of frames or however you want to do it. But I like to watch things silently to see if the edits work. So frequently, you might catch me, Elizabeth will walk in and say something like, what are you doing? Like I'm watching a movie with no sound on. And I'm like, well, I'm looking at the editing. And it's a way that, I mean, if it's really interesting. Like if you want to develop an appreciation for film beyond something you already have, try it. Take your favorite movie or take a favorite action scene. Another thing I like to do is count shots. Like I'll take a whole scene. Like here's an interesting, like in Raiders of the Lost Ark. Raiders of the Lost Ark has lots of different moments that I like to count shots in. And there's an incredible scene in that movie. There's two scenes that I think are very educational. One is the scene when the government agents come. I call it the Basil Exposition scene. It's one of the great Basil Exposition scenes in any movie, where Indiana Jones comes and meets the government agents. Denholm Elliott's watching, and he opens up the book and explains the entire arc of he explained the entire movie. So you know exactly where you are. Any screenwriting book would tell you that's a terrible thing to do. That's a terrible scene. get rid of that scene. You know, studio notes, that Basil exposition scene, get rid of that. But if you look, because Spielberg is such a master filmmaker, you don't care. I mean, that scene, because he's such a virtuoso director. But there's another scene where Denholm Elliott comes to Indiana Jones' house before he leaves, and they want you to go for it. You know, oh, yeah, you know, I would have gone after it as a young man myself. Watch that scene and see how Steven Spielberg is a master of blocking and how you go in and out of singles into 50-50s and amazing sequences. And I tell you, if you're truly interested in filmmaking, watching scenes, and the thing is, you already know what you've watched them a million times anyway, so you already know where they're going. But you'll look at them in a new way if you concentrate on the actual shots, the movement in the frame, where they edit, and like I like to count shots, like how many shots or how many setups are in this scene, because setups are different. Like you can tell from a single camera position is what's called a setup. So when you're talking about how many setups per day, that means you're going to put the camera in a location, and that's a shot, but it's also a setup. And sometimes from that particular setup, you might be coming back to that shot 3 or 4 times in a scene. So within that one setup, you've ended up getting 4 shots in the sequence, because a single the shot that you keep coming back to, but when you edit, you count each different edit as a shot, a single shot. But those shots can be derived from a single setup. So you might get 4 shots from a single setup or 8 shots from a single setup. But it's something that you should try. And if you're interested, and take your favorite movie and take your favorite sequence. And different movies have different kinds of, like, for instance, in a romantic comedy, like the scene when Harry Met Sally, the orgasm scene in the diner. Count the shots there and look at your setups and it'll I tell you, it might seem boring or weird, but it will instill in you an appreciation of the craft of filmmaking you don't normally get, because how many people tell you to sit down and watch a movie silently? Take your favorite scenes. I'm not saying I'm some guru for saying so, but it's something that I like to do from a professional standpoint. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've watched sequences in Apocalypse Now with the sound off, because obviously the editing, Walter Murch, the editorial work in Apocalypse Now, if you were to break it down, now this might be apocryphal. I just remember this. I could be remembering this wrong, but it took them the better part of 2.5 years to edit Apocalypse Now. And if you break down how many actual edits are in the film, I believe that it breaks down to 2.5 edits or 2.75 edits per day, meaning that over the course of if you take all the days they edited Apocalypse Now and you broke it down based on how long it took them to edit the film, it's 2.75, and that's not even 3 cuts a day. So they're like, okay, here 1 and 1, that's 1 edit. Here's 1 shot and 1, okay. So and then they don't even finish. So it's basically 6 pieces of film, the in and out. Insane. But when you watch it all together, I mean, the editorial in Apocalypse Now is astonishing. Absolutely astonishing. But just try it. It's just a different way that'll get you an appreciation for film. So anyway, back to Captain America, the Winter Soldier. So I was kind of watching it because I hadn't watched it in a long time. I don't even know if I've watched it in the last, couple of years. And it's generally considered to be top-tier Marvel. A lot of people call it the best Marvel movie. And coming off the heels of Captain America, Brave New World, Thunderbolts, and Fantastic Four, I wanted to sort of relive the magic of when the MCU was at its peak. And what's really interesting about Captain America, the Winter Soldier, that I really think, and why it works and why Marvel used to work so well, is it's rather simple, and I would call it mostly writing. Everybody, I mean, even though you're watching a superhero movie, so it's weird to say this, everybody seems quote unquote real. like they're real people. Like even when they meet up, like in the beginning of that movie, you're at the mall in Washington D.C. There are no troops that have been bussed in from other cities. D.C. is still normal at this point, even though it's crawling with Hydra agents, but we don't know that. But anyway, the whole opening scene of Captain America, Winter Soldier, is of course Sam Wilson. We find Sam Wilson jogging, and then of course he's joined by Steve Rogers running very fast around him and lapping him on your left. It's where they get. So we establish first of all we establish the meet cute of Sam Wilson and Steve Rogers. We establish a camaraderie between them. It is humorous, but then it's very naturalistic. It becomes it's a very real scene. It's very heartwarming, and the scene has a great button on it when Black Widow shows up, when Natasha shows up in her hot Corvette and spirits Steve off for a mission. And you're watching this, and I'm like, wow, the way it's shot, the actual shots. There's a really great shot, and there's a lot of the direction, the Russo brothers' direction. There's a great shot where you see, Steve Rogers come around, and the camera follows him, and then it has Sam Wilson, and then it pans. It's a single shot, and then Steve Rogers is way ahead of him. There's a lot of that in the beginning of Captain America, the Winter Soldier. So there's a lot of really interesting blocking and camera movement. The Russo brothers, clearly, it was really their first big budget movie, but Kevin Feige tapped them for a reason, and there's a lot of really great direction going on. People are firing things, and they come up against a window, and the camera, you'll rack focus, and then it'll spin over or do it. There's a lot of really great blocking in the film, and the fight scenes, while kinetic, there's some really impressive exchanges, because anybody who knows anything about action scenes, when you're making an action scene in a film, I think there's great action choreography and there's cheating. And so to me, editing in action sequences is cheating. Also, editing makes a great action sequence. And what I mean by cheating is, whenever you edit, especially during kinetic action, when you cut, you're immediately causing the audience, you're causing them to reorient. So when here's what a cheat is in an action sequence. And and again, if I tell you this, you're going to start looking at action sequences in a whole new way. If somebody throws a punch in an action sequence, and you throw the punch like this, you can use an edit. The camera comes here, and then you cut. And so you see the punch go here, and then you cut, and you see the person's reaction. So there's a cut there. That, to me, is a cheat. It's an easy thing to do. People do it all the time. It's great for low budget. But great action sequences, like great dance sequences, have multiple moves in the same frame. So there's choreography going on. Somebody will throw a punch, it gets blocked, and then somebody comes back. So it's boom, boom, boom. And you're seeing choreography within the frame. If you look at movies like Gareth Evans' The Raid, or as I like to call it, The Rad, or The Rad 2, even Radder, what makes those sequences great is, the martial arts sequences, is you see the camera, guys are fighting with knives and blades and whatever, and there's multiple, you see like back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth in the same frame. So you realize it's choreography, and they're really good. And when you see stuff like that, that's the baller action sequences. And then there are directors, like one of my favorite action sequences is in RoboCop. And it's in RoboCop where RoboCop invades Clarence Boddicker's cocaine factory. And there's a lot of big, wide master shots. And master shots are tough to create excitement because there's nowhere to go. If you're in a big, wide master shot, there's a great big, wide master shots like an overhead when RoboCop walks in and he's blasting, he's going, and it's cool. But it creates scale. It also creates a sense of geography and a sense of epicness. See, with action sequences, the key is to get further out and close up. You never want to really shoot with a 50-50 lens because we see the human mind, we are locked into what's called a fixed focal length. It's like shooting with a prime lens. You know, we see it basically at 50 millimeters. So when you're making movies, shooting with the 50 millimeter lens, a lot of people do it for various reasons, but it's kind of boring. Especially if the camera is, like, if you're standing next to your friend, your buddy here, and if you shoot a movie, like, from your point of view, and you see everything that happens from, like, with a 50 millimeter lens, it gets boring. So what you want to do is you want to get further away or closer up. Or you want to shoot wide, you know, you want to have a little wide angle action. What you want to do to make something truly cinematic is to make it so we're looking at images that are not the way we see them in real life. Now, sometimes seeing things the way we see in real life are needed, are necessary. I'm not saying never do that. Like comedies, it's not so important to get further away or closer up. It depends. Because with comedy, you're looking at people. It really depends. But if you're making science fiction, fantasy, and horror, getting further away, go for those Sergio Leone would sometimes get really far away, and the next cut would get really close up to someone's eyes. Fucking dope, right? I mean, that's when you're like, I mean, that's why Sergio Leone is Sergio Leone, and that's what cinematic language is. Now, what's interesting about Captain America: The Winter Soldier is there's because the Russo brothers were studying their favorite action sequences, and they knew they really did a good job when the attack on the ship in the beginning. There's some really, really great choreography there where you see fists are being exchanged. Yeah, there's a lot of times where a thing will be thrown, and then you'll see it'll occur, but there's enough in it where they'll go, and it's not like shaky cam. There's action cam, but it's not. Again, shaky cam is a way to, when you don't have great choreography, you know, you use shaky cam. It fakes up the action, it amps it up. These are tricks, and when you don't have the choreography, like if you're shooting a low budget movie, you rely on those kind of tricks to get you through. But the thing about The Winter Soldier from a filmmaking perspective is it feels very accomplished. So it begins with the characters when you meet Sam Wilson and Sam Wilson and Steve Rogers meet, you get a great scene that feels, it comes out of the writing and the performances and the direction and the music. All those things come together, and it feels fulfilling because the characters are acting like real people. They're not just perfunctory characters that they've been written into a screenplay. And when it comes to great IP filmmaking, you really need you need a combination of writing, directing. You need everything. You need writing, directing, cinematography, acting. But directors are key. Studio heads can't do this. You can't do this by committee. You need really talented people that have a certain amount of understanding. At its core, the key is to start with your characters and build out from that. So you need a great script with great dialogue. That's hopefully what you have first. And then you have characters, you have actors that aren't just saying the lines, but they're bringing life to what they're saying. I mean, these are obvious things. But it's really hard to do. And it's really hard to sustain. And there's a lot of people that aren't even aware the level of three-dimensional thinking that's going on. Like, you have to know it's not just a great line reading, but is the camera in a position? Are you looking at someone's face? Have you made the proper edit? So when you see somebody say something, maybe you have a two-shot, and you cut into someone's face and you get that little twinkle of recognition so the audience sees that they're not just saying their lines, but they're internalizing, and you actually are feeling what it is that's actually happening in the scene. And there's a lot going on in that opening scene. And if you watch Winter Soldier, you feel it. You feel it. And the thing is, you might not even be aware of why it is you're feeling these things, but you know when you feel them. And for us fans of IP cinema, whatever your favorite franchise is, the reason you love those movies is because they feel real. And you can tell there's lines of dialogue that aren't, I mean, memorable lines. I'll give you an example of a great line of dialogue. Michael J. Fox, when Doc Brown at the beginning of the movie tells him, he's showing him the DeLorean, and you see Michael J. Fox, and you know how he says it. You made a time machine out of a DeLorean? I mean, that's not my Michael J. Fox impression, but that line delivery, chef's kiss. It's perfect because you could have said it a million different ways, but you know that Michael J. Fox's delivery is perfect because the way he says it is telling the audience something about Marty McFly, the character. Like, he's contemplating it, but he knows Doc Brown can do it, but at the same time, the idea is you could have made a time machine out of anything, but you made one out of a DeLorean. I mean, it works so well. And Back to the Future is a great example of a movie where it all comes together. And we know that because you feel it. And there's so much stuff going on that didn't have to be there. You know, hello, Marvin? This is your cousin. Listen to this. I mean, there's so much stuff in Back to the Future that makes the souffle rise to the top. And you'd be surprised how many people don't, especially not all directors know how to do that because they didn't come out of a discipline that would allow them to understand all that. And that's why movie directors who are really good at their jobs are few and far between. And Marvel, I think Kevin Feige in the beginning had when he picked people like James Gunn and he picked the Russo brothers to come on board, those were out-of-the-box choices. But Kevin Feige knew, because Kevin Feige could look at Slither, or he could look at the work that the Russo brothers did on television and go, you know what you guys have? You might not have worked on a $150 million canvas before, but you have that thing. You understand how to edit, how to shoot, and you know which performances to get to create the thing that audiences want whenever they go see movies. That is not the case so much with the Marvel Cinematic Universe anymore. There are a lot of directors, I think, not to disparage directors, but I don't think that they had the kind of talent for whatever reason. I think one of the reasons that as we've moved through the Marvel Cinematic Universe, things have obviously changed. And something else people don't take into consideration. You know, a lot of people have been following what Beau DeMayo has been saying. He's being very disparaging about Marvel. And he was the showrunner of X-Men 97, and he was dismissed. He's basically going scorched earth. And by the way, I read everything he's writing. It's very, very, very interesting. But I think that there's one thing that people have a tendency to forget. And it's really easy when we bitch and moan and complain, but there's something that really isn't taken into consideration when you're thinking about Kevin Feige, you're thinking about Disney. Remember, the movies that they're making in the MCU cost upwards of $200 million. The amount of money that they're spending on Endgame and in Secret Wars, you know, I haven't read any credible reports, but, you know, it wouldn't surprise me that you're looking at $1 billion between two movies. Now, Disney doesn't have a vault with $1 billion in it. You can just go, hey, man, can we sign out $1 billion to make a movie? You have to borrow that money. You've got multiple revenue streams of people that are willing to invest, or you go to a bank and borrow that money. And as soon as you take that money out and start production, you're clocking interest. So the bank wants their interest back. So you're taking a risk. And anybody, Kevin Feige, every time he goes out, Louis D'Esposito and everybody at Marvel, what they are doing is they are borrowing hundreds of millions of dollars. And let me tell you, most television showrunners, because they're not necessarily the executive producers who created the show that are the custodians of the money, they are showrunners unless, you know, if you're Vince Gilligan and you created Breaking Bad and you created Better Call Saul, you're responsible if you're the creator of the show. But if you're work for hire and you're brought in to make something, while you're a custodian of the money, absolutely, to be sure, you don't have to go out and get it. And your work for hire. If it works, you can fucking bail. No one's going to hold you accountable. Kevin Feige's held accountable. Kathleen Kennedy's held accountable. And I'm not here to blow smoke up their asses. I'm just saying that we tend to forget that you've got people that are in charge of hundreds of millions of dollars. And the worse, the studio, because of your past success, is just expecting you to know what to do with it. Like the studio and the shareholders, they're like, well, you made one Marvel movie that's... shouldn't all Marvel movies be good? No. The fact that they had the run that they had, 23 movies in the Infinity Saga that average out to $1 billion each, unprecedented in Hollywood history. No one's ever done that, ever. And then, of course, we just take it for granted. Like, sure, Marvel movies are all going to make $1 billion. Like, that's our number. And we as fans, we've never been, not one of us has ever been responsible for that kind of money. We don't know what the pressure's like. We'll never know. God forbid. I'd love to be responsible for a $200 million Star Trek movie, because you know what I would do? I'd tell Paramount, here, take $75 million back, and let's make the Star Trek movie for $125 million. That's just me. And it would be good. So the thing is, we don't understand that. And we don't understand the corporate pressure and the amount of money that, because they're making projections. They're expecting, based on their 23 movies in the Infinity Saga, well, why shouldn't all Marvel movies just do what they do? And yet Infinity War and Endgame, I think, as far as fantasy cinema goes, and I say fantasy, cinefantastique, in terms of science fiction, fantasy, and horror, Infinity War and Endgame are two of the most satisfying. I mean, I wouldn't say they reach Godfather 1 and 2 levels of cinematic perfection, but as far as fantasy cinema goes, Infinity War and Endgame as a whole, and you can sit there and poke holes in the time, whatever. Those movies, for what they do and what they accomplish, are astonishing. They're astonishing. And once you've done that, there's nowhere else to go. Like, you can't. And then you follow it up with Black Widow, which I think was a mistake. They should have taken a couple years off. I'm not going to get into, because we're going to talk about it. But back to Winter Soldier. Winter Soldier is not perfect. It isn't. The Emile Zola stuff, the Toby Jones stuff. And if you think about it, Hydra, suddenly everybody in Hydra, all of S.H.I.E.L.D., everyone is now a turncoat. That's the big ask, though, as we've talked about on this channel. The big ask in that movie is, yes, you'll go with Hydra somehow infiltrated all of America for 50 years, post-World War II. And I get that. And then you're going to kill Nick Fury, and you're just going to go kill Captain America. So it's strange credulity. But for the most part, what you do get all throughout Captain America, the Winter Soldier, is you feel like you're watching real people. The relationship that Steve Rogers and Natasha has. We've never seen that again. The relationship Sam Wilson and Steve have. Then the relationship all three of them have. The relationship with Nick Fury. You feel that all of these people are fully realized human beings, whether they're super soldiers or not. And that's what makes the movie so delicious. Is if you took all the Hydra shenanigans out and you took all the superheroics out and you turned it into a conspiracy thriller without the action, but it was just these characters dealing with the fact that their government agency was, if you went No Way Out with it, Kevin Costner's looking for Yuri. If you've never seen No Way Out, watch it. If you took all the action, it would still be a good movie, watching all these characters together, because you love these characters. First and foremost, from the opening, nothing has even happened. Two guys meet on the mall. They meet right there with the Washington Monument, jogging, and you love that. You love them. You just meet Sam Wilson. They have their meet cute, and you are fucking in. You are in. In. And you love this movie. Now, what's really interesting, as a case in point, if you look at, I love Anthony Mackie. I think he's a great performer. I think he's a really good actor. I think he's very endearing. And I don't think he's ever really phoned in a performance. Whether you're watching 8 Mile, or whether you're watching Synchronic, or whether you're watching Twisted Metal, whatever. He's a great performer. And I think, unfortunately, what has happened in the MCU, the quality of the writing and the quality of the filmmaking has been significantly diminished. Whether you want to believe what Beau DeMayo says, and I'm sure there's a lot of truth to what he says, they don't have the people that they used to have in terms of their, whatever, the Marvel story group, the Brian Bendises of the world. They have been missing the and you can tell because like when I watch Love and Thunder or Quantum Mania, totally off the rails. Those movies, it's amazing to me that you go from Ant-Man to Quantum Mania, whereas Ant-Man, same thing. You love those characters, and by the time you get to Quantum Mania, the characters don't even matter, and they're buried under just gobbledygook. And I think that and what I fear is what the Marvel Cinematic Universe did so brilliantly when it began was it gave us, we love Iron Man because of Tony Stark, because of Robert Downey Jr. You could have taken all the superheroics out of it. If that movie was not about Iron Man, but it was about a captain of industry, one of the smartest people in America, you made it, it's more of an Elon Musk character that wasn't Iron Man, but he had a crisis of conscience. And he still had to get out of the situations he's in using ingenuity, but he was a playboy and all that. You could have made that a straight film that was not a comic book movie. We still would have loved that film because we love the characters, we love the relationships. You love those people, first and foremost. And the MCU worked because of it. And Captain America, Thor, Iron Man. We love the characters. We love the characters. Kenneth Branagh. One of the great Shakespeare of the modern age, between British theater and then cinema. Kenneth Branagh is Mr. Shakespeare. Amazing. And the fact that they got him to direct Thor, I don't think people quite understand just how genius that was. And if you haven't, I would suggest going back and watching Kenneth Branagh's Henry V, his first feature, Henry V. The Shakespeare play, Henry V, and of course he plays Henry V, and he gives one of the great Shakespeare speeches, the St. Crispin's Day speech. We few, we happy few, we band of brothers. It's always funny whenever you delve into Shakespeare, you realize how much of our catchphrases in Western civilization actually came from Shakespeare. I always love that. Oh, that's where that came from. Yeah, it's usually from Shakespeare. Alas, poor Yorick, But and I was watching this movie, and when it was over, I'm like, God damn, man, that was so good. Like, I'd forgotten, even the Russo brothers. I wish the behind the scenes documentaries that I worked on for the X-Men movies, and especially Superman Returns and Lord of the Rings, I wish that somebody had thought. The Marvel movies used to have, like, Iron Man has great special features, but I would love to have done a Lord of the Rings style special features series that you could have carried through the entire 23 movies of the Infinity Saga, where you had, like, literally 10 hours of documentaries for each movie. Because it would have been so much fun to, Disney, they wouldn't allow Rinsler's book. He did those great coffee table books, The Making of Star Wars, The Making of Empire, The Making of Jedi. Rinsler, who's now passed away, when he did his book on The Force Awakens, they're like, oh no, we can't publish that. Yeah, you filmmakers, because you can't do your jobs the way other people used to, and warts and all. There's nothing wrong with telling those stories. But it would have been great to be able to do a celebratory 10-hour documentary on each of the Marvel movies. Just to watch the evolution of the whole universe and all of the thought processes that went in. But when you watch Winter Soldier, it's such an evolution from even Joe Johnston. Hiring Joe Johnston to do Rocketeer. He did the Rocketeer. ILM, he came out of ILM. He came out of working for ILM, and he was able to make the Rocketeer, which is, where is that 4K, Disney? That is such a wonderful movie. Not perfect, and of course, it kind of makes Dave Stevens' comic book material a little bit more family-friendly, but who doesn't love The Rocketeer? What a great James Horner score. And what a great to pick him, Kevin Feige, again, thinking, who are we going to get to make Captain America the First Avenger? Let's get the guy who made Rocketeer, who used to work for ILM and George Lucas. I mean, maybe the Rocketeer wasn't a huge box office success. Great comic book adaptation. Not many people knew the Rocketeer. Poor Dave Stevens, one of the great comic artists of the modern age. My God, to look at his Rocketeer work is to weep at the beauty of it. And if you want it as an interesting thought experiment, Rocketeer must be on Disney Plus, right? Go and watch Rocketeer because they're concurrent to one another. World War II movies. Go watch the Rocketeer and then watch Captain America, the First Avenger. I'd like to believe that those movies are set in the same universe. I kind of do. The same way I'd like to believe For All Mankind is the true Star Trek prequel. I like to believe that the Rocketeer is in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, even though it's not. Different comic company. I get it. But try and check it out. So anyway, I was just and the latter since like Black Widow, the first half of Black Widow has it going on. And then you kind of it goes off the rails. Then and even then, that's when the writing starts to feel, okay, now we're writing a Marvel movie. Whereas Captain America, the Winter Soldier, between the Russo brothers, and I think Marcus and McFeely wrote the script for Winter Soldier, they were still working in, like, we got to make these people are real. We're not necessarily making a comic book movie, even though it's the second Captain America movie and it's post-Avengers. We're going to ground this movie. This is 70s conspiracy. That's why we're going to get Robert Redford, Mr. 3 Days of the Condor, Mr. All the President's Men. We're going to get him. That was such a great choice. But when you watch Brave New World, it's so cobbled together. It was like nobody knew what to, they just didn't, they have not been able, they've not had a handle on any of this. And the movies that have succeeded, Spider-Man No Way Home, in the Multiverse of Madness, and Deadpool and Wolverine, Multiverse of Madness almost made $1 billion. No Way Home, those are all kind of gimmick movies. So they're almost, they're outliers in the sense that in phases 4 and 5 they made money, but they're not, I would say those are not great movies. They're a lot of fun to watch, but they're gimmicky. And while I'll give it to you, No Way Home, seeing the 3 Spider-Men together, fantastic, all the villains, I loved it, so much fun, but it's not a great movie. I know a lot of people are, but not the way Winter Soldier is. Not the way not like building those scenes that make you love those people. What you love is the spectacle of it all. Deadpool and Wolverine, the whole thing's a goof. Deadpool and Wolverine, if it had that on your left scene, I mean, it kind of would be silly to try and do that with those two guys. That movie was already off the rails in its conception. So you go with it. But that film could have been I wanted Deadpool and Wolverine to be Deadpool 1 meets Days of Future Past. If that makes any sense. It wasn't that. And I get it. Could have been, though. It could have been. And it still could have been. But it doesn't matter because nobody cares because it made $1.5 billion. Fine. Anyway. I wanted to read an article. Found an article that it was sent to me, but everyone knows I look at Medium all the time. And I don't read Medium because they're like the greatest articles in the world in terms of their writing. But in their fandom, they actually have a fandom section. And I frequently find myself, something will happen. It's like the old Repo Man, Lori Walters thing. You find one in every car. Sometimes you think shrimp, a plate of shrimp, and then everyone's like, what? Anyway, just go watch Repo Man. Have you not seen Alex Cox's Repo Man from 1984? Do the Bobster a favor. Here's what I want you to do. I want you to go watch this double feature and get back to me. Watch Slava Sukerman's Liquid Sky and watch Repo Man. That's a double feature. And when you're done, you're going to come to me and go, what the hell is that? But just trust me on this. But anyway, then you'll understand. Shrimp, plate of shrimp. But these Medium articles are frequently, I'll be thinking about something and it'll show up serendipitously. It'll show up in Medium. And then someone will send it to me, even though I've already seen it. I'm like, I got to do an article Here is the article that I wanted to read that was published yesterday in Medium called One Marvelous Flaw, and it's by Scott Safran. Between 2008 and 2019, the Marvel Cinematic Universe dominated cinema screens the world over. Moreover, it conquered popular culture. It made lifelong comic book geeks' dreams come true, foisting characters like Rocket Raccoon and Ant-Man into the zeitgeist. It was the zenith of the Marvel experiment, a nearly 60-year effort to weave a narrative tale traversing hundreds of titles and thousands upon thousands of individual issues. And it remains Marvel's Achilles heel. If I'm to recommend one book to any lover of comic books or superheroes, it is Douglas Volk's All of the Marvels. A truly titanic achievement, All of the Marvels, A Journey to the Ends of the Biggest Story Ever Told, is the charting of Volk's trek through more than 27,000 individual issues as released by Marvel Comics from 1961 until 2017. In the book, Volk analyzes the many tentpole characters of the larger Marvel universe, the overarching stories, and its intersections with popular culture. Though its chapters have their specific focuses, from individual heroes to entire eras, Volk's book presents a uniform thesis. The Marvel canon is a single story, one which uniquely appeals to its audience and reflects the natural course of history as a funhouse mirror of America. As a lifelong fan and student of the art form, I absolutely adore this book, particularly for the deep introspection it drove within me, that meaning the author. What makes Marvel Marvel, and what inspired Volk's foray into its entire oeuvre, is its interconnectivity. From some of its earliest days, Marvel's characters and stories blended together. Heroes from different titles would cameo in each other's issues. Yes, but even deeper than that, their concurrent stories would impact events across the series. A devastating attack on Midtown Manhattan in Avengers might be referenced in The Amazing Spider-Man, or even have a direct impact on Spidey's day-to-day crime fighting. There became an intentional direction to the cross-comic storytelling. Not universally and rarely perfectly, but the events of Marvel's monthlies often progress in a similar direction and toward convergence, usually in the form of large crossover event comics which present a singular narrative across titles. This is what made Marvel successful. It capitalized on essential human inclination toward order and coherence. Marvel was special. It was apart from its contemporaries because there was something going on here. Each Marvel comic wasn't just its own story, but a glimpse from one perspective into a large universe. And every additional Marvel title was yet another perspective on an ongoing saga as big and interconnected as our own. And so, to be just as successful, the MCU set out to do the same. Starting with Iron Man, Marvel Studios plotted the same playbook as its four-color ancestor to unimaginable success, albeit in far fewer entries. Such is the lot of Hollywood cinema. The MCU matched step for step, tying its stories together to form a massive 23-film epic known now as the Infinity Saga. With each passing year, every one of its movies to hit theater screens, Marvel Studios progressed this epic with team-ups, crossovers, cameos, Easter eggs, in-jokes, references, and end credit sequences in an attempt to entice its audience to show up for the next superhero blockbuster. And, as we are all too well aware, it worked. It worked phenomenally well. It worked to the tune of billions and billions of dollars at the worldwide box office. Of course, there were copycats, many, many copycats. DC tried its Snyderverse with a weird, half-baked, and slightly backward rush job to a forgettable Justice League movie. Universal attempted their Dark Universe, a revival of their 1930s proto-cinematic universe. Sony is still trying to make their live-action Spider-Man Sonyverse happen despite legendary flops in Morbius, Madam Web, and Kraven. And like with most things in life, Lego ended up being the most successful. But it's ludicrously easy to point fingers at the failures and diagnose all their missteps. The Sony Spidey films aren't faithful enough to their source material, and also don't include the one character who ties them all together. Universal's Monsterverse put its cart about 1,000 yards before its horse. The Snyderverse had a fundamental misunderstanding of its characters and tone of the DC Comics brand, and most of these movies were just flat out bad, occasionally very bad. Yet each one of these critiques still missed the fatal flaw. A flaw that has undone even the MCU, that has slowly begun to poison Hollywood producers against the idea of the cinematic universe. There is really only one story to tell. Now, that's quite obviously a gross exaggeration. There are limitless stories to tell. There are so many stories to tell, so many archetypes and infinite variations thereupon, that it is simply unquantifiable, likely impossible to even estimate. Perhaps we should redefine our understanding of mathematics around the concept that the largest possible number is the amount of stories which humans have the capacity to tell. So what on earth do I mean by all this? Think about the medium of comic books. There have been at least a dozen unique issues, these days at least 3 dozen, published by the major comic book companies every single month for at least 75 years now. For all intents and purposes, they are infinite. And not infinite as in an impossibly large quantity, but as in there's really no end. Every month, more and more chapters in a never-ending story that will one day stretch out into the cosmos and back if we so allow it. Thus, while every story arc has an end of some sort and many titles have been canceled, few comic book stories have really ever ended. In some form or fashion, these characters and their stories are undying. Be them Batman, who is closing in on 1,000 continuous issues, or Punisher, whose story has been woven in and out of various series for 50 years now. Film demands an end. It is the core expectation of the audience when engaging the medium. A beginning, a middle, and an end. Every movie and every series worth its salt. In fact, this is precisely what often cripples standalone sequels. They bear the weight of replicating a contained narrative in sequence without the lever of functioning as the second act. It is actually something of a cheat code to be a trilogy. The second and third entries have specific narrative functions in constructing the overlaying arc and therefore have an essential purpose. The central conceit here is, once again, that humans crave order. We like function and purpose, and we want the media with which we engage to reflect those values. This thing is doing that for a specific reason. The Dark Knight escalated the tension of Batman's relationship with Gotham City. It stood alone as its own story, but it built upon Batman Begins and led to the blow-off in The Dark Knight Rises. Not only was it superb as a standalone, but it was even better for its place within the trilogy. The MCU thrived from 2008 to 2019 because it was telling one story. It had the appearance of an expansive universe, but it was all working toward a single narrative, to a vastly greater degree than even its comic book counterparts have ever done. Every single entry advanced the plot of the Infinity Saga in character development or plot, whether we knew it at the moment or not, setting up for the 2-part payoff in Infinity War and Endgame. Sure, there were Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. and the Netflix shows, but they were quite distantly canon, held at arm's length by creators and fans alike. When it came to be branded, promoted, theater-released entries, it was all Infinity Saga all the time. And it had to be, because every effective film series, with paltry few exceptions, has abided the single story rule, because it is what we want. It is what we expect in cinema. But expect is the operative word. It is the crux of this entire thesis. Expectations are everything. A notable exception you may have been mulling over is James Bond. James Bond is an ultra-successful film franchise that is quite notably not one continuous story. Moreover, it leads to an anthology, a series of adventures not essentially linked by continuous narrative but by recurring characters, themes, and motifs. In fact, when it attempts to create inter-series narrative linkages, it often draws ire from the audience. See Spectre. But those sub-series are what set audience expectations. As soon as George Lazenby was cast in On Her Majesty's Secret Service after Sean Connery's first retirement, it reset audience expectations, and quite obviously, that has continuously worked to extraordinary success. But it is also where the MCU has faltered, and where many who tempt in its footsteps fail. If you don't have one story to tell, you cannot act like you do. The MCU suffered from its own success. After Endgame, there was very obviously no subsequent saga awaiting viewers. Black Widow, Shang-Chi, Eternals, WandaVision, Falcon and the Winter Soldier, and Loki offered only the most tenuous of connections, if any, to each other and to a broader, unifying narrative. When the multiverse shtick rolled out full force, it was Marvel's admission to its audience that it really did have nothing. The existence of a multiverse where anything and everything suddenly became possible sapped the heart out of the once enrapturing MCU. With potentially thousands of variants, who could or should we actually invest in? Who was in it for the long haul? Who was a glorified cameo? And those chapters without multiverse roots, such as Thor, Love and Thunder, perhaps, what was their purpose? This new schema disrupted the expected cadence of the MCU, attempting to straddle the line between unified narrative and anthological entries. Moreover, it put far more weight on the individual releases. The burden of this quality of content was never meant to bear. The MCU is always more than the sum of its parts by its own design. And if I might interject, leading up to the Avengers, they knew that's where they were going. From the end of Iron Man, they knew they were going up to the Avengers, so they knew what they were doing. And now, without a sum, the MCU is only its parts. DC Comics is not known for its cinematic prowess, particularly in its all-time flops courtesy of the Snyderverse, but outside its pathetic attempt at duplicating Kevin Feige's success, DC has put out some of the very best and most influential superhero films ever made, and yes, they're mostly Batman movies. A contributing quality to their success was each film or film series' unique approach to the material. Richard Donner saw Superman in a specific light. Tim Burton brought a certain perspective to Batman, expanded upon by Joel Schumacher, and then reinterpreted by Christopher Nolan and once more by Matt Reeves. Much like the actual periodicals upon which this is all based, DC Comics films live in their independence. They hinge on story and self-sufficiency. Again, this is a quality shared in the monthly comics produced by the Warner Brothers subsidiary. Yes, crossovers and events do abound, following suit from once crosstown rival, but reading DC Comics titles comes with relative security that what happens in Batman and Action Comics and Wonder Woman stays there. Usually. Put another way, you typically don't need to read other comics to completely understand the story. This isn't necessarily better or worse, it's just what separates the two publishing titans. It manifests in one's ability to recommend the content to interested laypeople. Typically, Marvel fans will suggest a run, a specific creative team's time on a title, or an entire series outright, while DC fans will often propose a contained story or an original graphic novel. Marvel prioritizes the journey. DC prioritizes the destination, or more pointedly, an end. What comes of 2025 Superman from James Gunn, a sturdy summer blockbuster on its own, will have to be reevaluated once Peter Safran, sadly no relation, and Gunn's DC universe take shape in the coming years. What this does allow is liberty, creative liberty, narrative liberty, freedom to move from work to work, altering perspective and style and time period and cast, and whatever else you could possibly want to tinker with. It removes restrictive barriers within the story world and outside the realm of reality. It dissolves external expectations and opens up the galaxy of possibility. Certainly that liberty in and of itself is not always good. After all, it's what gave us 1997's Steel and 2004's Catwoman. and it does abandon the sense of design that endears our desire for order. But it never creates a false hope or intimidating standard. It never risks disappointment except in the individual quality of its own content. Even in the wake of the two strongest MCU releases in years, Thunderbolts and Fantastic Four First Steps, two movies explicitly linked together and setting up 2026's Avengers Doomsday in respective post-credit scenes, the MCU feels only marginally more cohesive than a decade's low in the fallout of Captain America Brave New World mere months ago. It has not been Marvel Studios' fault alone. Their Jonathan Majors-led Kang plans evaporated before our eyes. All the same, their post-Endgame strategy, featuring a campaign of straight-to-streaming Disney Plus releases, typifies a volume-based approach that strays from the proven model of a controlled, intentional architecture. And this architecture is the very heart of Marvel, its simultaneous life force and its greatest weakness. If the MCU is not able to retrack itself by Doomsday, it will be forced to stand by the quality of individual releases, something not even its IP-originating comics have been known to do with tremendous reliability. Better than anyone, Marvel can distill an infinite universe of characters and possibilities to a single story that preys upon our thirst for order amongst the chaos of existence. Should Gunn's DCU prove itself more than a Superman-sized flash in the pan, Marvel must return to its core strength if it wants any chance at all of retaining the theatrical throne. That article was by Scott Safran. It was in Medium. There is a link down in the description where the tip link is if you want to use the tip link, so you can go read this article or share the article with anyone else. And again, Medium has obviously user-generated content, just like YouTube, but they have a fandom section, and they always have really interesting commentary. Look, some of it is not great, and I don't agree with it. And, you know, I just like sharing these articles because they're jumping off points for a conversation. But I would recommend everybody, you know, I think it's $5 a month. And there's all kinds of articles there. And I find them to be interesting. And I thought that was a pretty good distillation of, I mean, we all kind of know what happens. I mean, a lot of people talk about, I do think that political agenda was part of the problem with the MCU. I think in terms of their hiring practices, who they were hiring to direct certain movies. I mean, you know, people talk about like, okay, you had to have a black director directing Black Panther. But one of the things that I think that Ryan Coogler proved, and I know that I disagree with the critical drinker about the quality of the film, but I thought what Ryan Coogler did as a writer-director in terms of revitalizing the Rocky franchise, if you were to tell me that he was going to be able to give us Apollo Creed's son, Adonis Creed, and turn it into not only a great movie, a movie that I totally loved, but also a film that would have 2 subsequent sequels, I would have said, get out of town. But he did. And between Fruitvale Station and showing what he did with Creed in terms of being a very assured writer-director, I think that's what secured him the job with Black Panther. And of course, Black Panther in typical Marvel style was introduced in, of course, Civil War. And the casting of Chad Boseman was masterful. But what was interesting, again, Civil War, you had the Russo brothers following up Winter Soldier, and you had Marcus and McFeely writing. And while people might say that Baron Zemo was not maybe the strongest villain in the world, but he did succeed doing what he needed to do. He tore the Avengers apart. He put a wedge in between Steve Rogers and Tony Stark. And that, if you watch those films, I mean, you go from Winter Soldier to Avengers 2.5 and Civil War. I mean, hell, those movies, as you go back and watch them and the importance that they've taken on in the MCU, even Avengers Age of Ultron, which just gets better every time I watch it. That's why I can't wait to see what Terry Matalas did for his Vision Quest, or whatever it's going to be called, series. I'm really excited because I think Terry Matalas, the reason that he was hired to do that is because with his work on the 12 Monkeys TV series and, of course, Picard Season 3, where you saw what Terry and his writing staff, people like Christopher Monfett, were able to do with those legacy characters, shows that that's why he got the job. You know, what are we going to do with Vision? and the character of Data and artificial intelligence seeking out its own meaning, and I'm excited. And that's something else people don't talk about. I think that between after Doomsday, we're going to get Vision, and I think that's going to be a big issue. I think Vision hopefully will, because I love Paul Bettany's Vision. I love his journey going from Jarvis all the way up to Vision and now White Vision. And I also think one of the greatest translation of a comic book character, one of the greatest translations of a comic book character to its cinematic counterpart is how Vision looked in Avengers Age of Ultron. What a great fucking character design. Wow. I mean, you know, what they did with Thor, what they did with Vision, really, really tremendous stuff. So let's give it up. But again, you know, I think this article pointed out that the multiverse saga was a mess, because if they were going to start, I know they had to fill in the blanks and all that, but, and as this article pointed out, the Eternals, I mean, where's Arishem the Judge? We don't know. Shang-Chi, why don't we get 3? Why is there not a trilogy of Shang-Chi movies? They were directionless. And part of that was they were all derailed because Disney Plus, they're like, okay, we're going to start a new service, and Marvel and Star Wars is going to carry us through, because there's a lack of understanding that you can't just conjure up, you can't just make a Marvel movie and it's going to be great. The reason Marvel movies were great is because they had these people working on them, were very focused. You had that story group. You had people like Marcus and McFeely working with the Russo brothers. You had Joss Whedon, who has all the, you know, hey, Joss Whedon's the basis for all modern Star Trek, which is why all modern Star Trek is terrible, because they're really trying to make Buffy and Angel in space, and it's not that. Star Trek has the same problem as this article. The powers that be at Star Trek are telling you that, hey, we're going to make prequel series that happened before the original series, but none of it's not going to jibe. We're just going to change all the canon, and all of you people that have been watching Star Trek for the last 58 years, or actually 59 years now, next year is the 60th anniversary, we're not going to even attempt to caress it all in, but we're going to gaslight you and tell you it's real. And then, of course, the fucking idiots at Memory Alpha are like, how can I make it all work? So they've ruined the entire history of Star Trek. Thank you, Memory Alpha. Because the people that own the franchise, whatever. Don't get me started. That's a whole nother show. But clearly, the MCU, the Infinity Saga worked so brilliantly. There has been no plan. If they had started out with a multiverse saga and built up to it, I mean, it would have been really intriguing to start with WandaVision, and which was very wild to start because you're jumping into a situation. But, you know, it Multiverse of Madness was interesting, but also kind of unfulfilling. And look, no one has been more bummed out than I have. I mean, I like a lot of Eternals, but again, it goes nowhere, does nothing, which is unfortunate. I would like to see the Marvel Cinematic Universe come back. I don't know if it can, to be honest. I mean, Fantastic Four was fine. I liked Shackman is a good director. I liked the characters. But again, because they wanted it to be 2 hours, I felt that I was watching Fantastic Four for all of its beautiful design. I love seeing how Galactus was portrayed. I love the feel of it all. The movie totally felt like I was watching. I was never in it. I was watching something from a distance. You know, you never had those moments from the beginning of Winter Soldier when Sam Wilson and Steve Rogers, you know, when Sam Wilson tells him to listen to Marvin Gaye's Trouble Man, and he pulls out, I got to write that down. I mean, you're in. Fantastic Four, I thought it was a lot of fun. It was like, it really was a great representation. You're never in it. For as good as I thought everything was there, I felt a distance. I was never pulled inside of it like the MCU used to do to me for the most part all the time. Even when it was not as successful like with Iron Man 2 or Thor the Dark World, because the way the characters were portrayed, I was pulled in. I was inside. Fantastic Four, I felt distance. And at the end of the day, you got superhero mayhem. You got all the stuff, and it was good. But I was more inside of Thunderbolts. It's just in Thunderbolts, the story was small in scope. If you look at Thunderbolts, it takes place in a couple of rooms. Sure, they're outside, they drive through the desert or whatever, but it doesn't have a lot of scope, which is okay. But if you look at it, it's kind of unexpected. And I like Thunderbolts, but I didn't feel like I was getting a full meal from Thunderbolts. And with Fantastic Four, I felt more like I was a guest at a really nice dinner party where I didn't really know all the guests very well. I came with a friend, and the food was good, but I didn't feel like I belonged there, if that makes any sense. Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't, I don't know. But we'll see. Let's see what you guys have to say. I love, super chats and tips. Let me get to your supers. I'm sure there's a lot of people who have. So, Deez Webos has been a member of this channel for 34 months. Thank you. Darth Plato says, the hair looks great, Rob. Oh, thank you. It's a little tousled. I was taking a little nap. I had the dogs on top of me as I was taking a little nappy nap. Scott Bartholomew says the Strange New Worlds editing is absolutely horrible. Yeah, it is. Strange New Worlds is it's an awful show, but in a very different way from Discovery. DBZZ Now says Winter Soldier and Civil War are, in my opinion, the best made MCU films on a technical standpoint. Not my favorite movies, but the most rewatchable. Oh, I agree. They're really well. I mean, the car chase when Nick Fury's being chased, and then the scene where Steve confronts Winter Soldier on the roadways, really, really well done. Really well. And look at the editing. Look at some of the swish pans. There's a lot of really great action blocking that is again, it's one of the things I'll tell you, one of the things, like, Christopher Nolan's action has always been, and I think this is it's always been criticized because, he hasn't had the choreography. I'm not saying that it's bad, but it's not as good as certain things, whereas there's some really great fight choreography going on in Winter Soldier. So yeah, they're very rewatchable, 100%. Scott Bartholomew says Inception and 2001 are my favorite edited movies. Well, I can see that. Although, I think one of my favorite edited movies of all time, Allan Haim edited All That Jazz. It's the movie that made me want to be an editor, so it's one of my favorites. Fearless Wolf says my favorite ED film is The Longest Day. It captures D-Day from all sides, American, British, French, Dutch resistance, and German, showing the true scale and complexity of the Normandy invasion. Yeah, I think kids today should watch it because apparently people have forgotten a lot about history. Royston Bailey says, Rob, if the filmmakers for Star Wars and Marvel can't make great films anymore, who's accountable for that? Well, here's the thing. I think that what has happened with more so Marvel than Star Wars is that these are, remember, the reverse of how a film used to be made. You had a filmmaker that had an idea that wanted to make it. Both Marvel Cinematic Universe movies and Star Wars movies are corporate product. They do not begin with a filmmaker desiring to tell a story. They begin with the corporation wanting to continue on their product, which is Star Wars, or in the case of Marvel, the MCU. Now, Kevin Feige, and I've never met Kevin Feige. I don't think, if I did, I met him briefly on the set of X2 or something, but I don't remember. I'm a huge admirer of what Kevin Feige did with the MCU, and Kevin Feige worked on 14 Marvel movies before the MCU, before Iron Man. 14 Marvel movies. He saw what worked and what didn't work, going from 2000 all the way up to 2008. He was there when Daredevil and Elektra got made. He was there when the Ghost Rider movies got made. He saw Punisher's movies getting made. He saw Man-Thing get made. Brett Leonard's Man-Thing. I mean, there was a lot of, he saw what worked and what didn't. And when they presided over, you hear Jeff Bridges tell the story about how they were writing in a caucus on set for Iron Man. They were working on that and making it all work. And he did keep the MCU on track, and they did make the Infinity Saga. But I think what ends up happening is that the corporation supersedes creativity. It's like, we need these stories. We need to have you do all of these things rather than just be content. Like, okay, we're making, it's like everything else. Our entire country, once something starts to make money, everybody wants more. Let's make more money. And when it comes to creative endeavors like movies, they forget that movies they're not just birthed. They don't just, come into the world. They have to be carefully nurtured and grown. And I think what happened to the MCU is they became more and more that the studio figured they could create, they will fix it in post kind of a thing. But that attitude carried through. They were overextended. I think that they didn't have, they weren't focusing enough, and they certainly didn't have filmmakers that were focusing enough on, they weren't allowed, it's like, we now need the movies to do this. Still, I liked Thor Ragnarok a lot, but I think Thor Love and Thunder, it's unwatchable to me. I can't watch that movie. And Taika Waititi, I think, is a good filmmaker, but my God, that movie is totally off the rails. And so you have to have, it used to be Marvel's strength, there was a synergy between the directors they hired who knew what the assignment was. They worked in tandem with the studio. I mean, the Guardians of the Galaxy movies are clearly James Gunn movies, but he understood the assignment. And him and Kevin Feige, they probably were working in tandem together, like the Russos. They work with their design team. They have the Marvel design team coming up with gags and adventure sequences and action sequences. Sometimes years before they're ever, they'll incorporate them into scripts. But they had a machine, a collaborative machine, not unlike television, where the executive producers and the showrunners are the creators of the show, call the shots. If you work on a TV show and you direct television, I've directed some episodes of TV, I get to come in and direct. I was my own editor on my TV episodes, but I do my edits and then I leave. I was lucky on the 5 episodes of TV I directed, and yes, they were only Skinamax shows, but and we shot them in 3 days. But I tried to bring some artistry into them, even though it was insane how much we had to shoot 10 pages a day. It was crazy. But you leave. The director leaves. The director, it's not television is not an auteurist medium. Whereas I think what the Russo brothers were able to do, I think Marvel actually pioneered a new way of working. They made auteurist corporate product. If that makes any sense. And I think that they were pretty good at it. And I think that the Infinity Saga benefited from having recurring writers like Marcus and McFeely writing Winter Soldier, Civil War, Infinity War, and Endgame. And what's really interesting is when you watch other writers other than James Gunn, Marcus and McFeely handled the Guardians of the Galaxy very, very well. The Guardians of the Galaxy in Endgame are great. And Thor and Rocket are great. And that was really interesting. And so they had a team of people that went from film to film to film. And that hasn't been the case. I mean, Captain. I like the first Captain Marvel film, but those directors got the boot. Joe Johnston never came back after making. Joss Whedon obviously couldn't come back because of his troubles, but you don't see that happening in phases 4 and 5. So it'll be really interesting. Only one of them is back. One of the writers is back for Endgame and Secret Wars. And then you have the Russos back. But the Russos, obviously, parlayed their amazing success within Marvel. When they got out of Marvel, they became very undisciplined. We got the Gray Man and we got the Electric State. Between those two movies, they spent $550 million. And those movies, the Cherry, the movie they made with Tom Holland, I mean, they haven't had a great track record since then. And I think a lot of that, and I like those guys, but I think that, they worked really well having Marcus and McFeely writing their scripts. And I think Marcus and McFeely also wrote Electric State. But having Kevin Feige and that team at Marvel that was already a well-oiled machine when the Russo brothers arrived, that synergy worked well. Hopefully they can recreate that magic for Doomsday and Secret Wars. My only problem with Doomsday is it's based on a gimmick. It's a gimmick. And it's not, you don't have the culmination. No one's sitting there going, wow, the Infinity Saga we couldn't wait. If you want something done, you got to do it yourself. And look, let me just tell you, and I've said this before, I keep saying it, but the way they opened Endgame, when you open up, before the Marvel logo starts, it comes up on Hawkeye's family she's making some hot dogs. Mrs. Hawkeye's making some hot dogs. He's teaching his daughter how to shoot. That opening, and then Mr. Fantasy playing over the Marvel logo. Those decisions were peak creative decisions. That opening scene, Mr. Fantasy as a choice of a source cue going into the Marvel logo, that tells you how they were. I know it's a simple thing, but that shows you the kind of creativity that was happening at Marvel that's been completely gone from the MCU. Just that little bit. The decision to open the movie that way with no logo, then Mr. Fantasy, you see the Marvel logo, you watch the... Unbelievable. I know it seems like a funny thing to say, well, why is that so good? It was those creative choices, and those creative choices were evidenced all throughout the MCU and have been missing since then. They have not had any cohesion. But that's to answer your question. That's a long way of answering your question, Royston, is that the movies are created by the corporations as opposed to the filmmakers. And it was always going to be the case with Marvel, but there used to be synergy between the two. Now, the filmmakers, the directors they have working on those movies are pretty much, you'll get Sam Raimi doing Multiverse of Madness. The problem is, Multiverse of Madness, the story was not a great follow-up to WandaVision. They wanted it to be, but it wasn't. It was, again, cobbled together. They didn't really know what they wanted to do, and it's evident in the story. Sam did lots of really cool stuff with what he was doing there, but the story doesn't hold together. Ride the Sano says, today is the 30th anniversary of Mortal Kombat. Bruh, this film will always be an absolute banger to so many, and the soundtrack is peak. Bob, take me back to 1995. Well, I would. Then we can go see 7 for the first time. David Fincher 7. But yeah, Mortal Kombat, I mean, again, like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles in 1990, it's a specific generation's movie. Mortal Kombat's not a great movie, but it does have a great soundtrack. Royston Bailey says, my dream is a Terrence Malick Silver Surfer film. You know what? I would watch that. Days of Heaven in the MCU, a Terrence Malick movie in the MCU. I mean, I think Chloe Zhao was as close some of the stuff she was doing in Eternals. But again, Eternals, which I liked as a science fiction movie, but as part of the MCU, even its ending, where's the Black Knight? Where's Blade? Castle Grayskull asks, will we ever see Alpha Flight in the MCU? Okay. How they did not introduce Alpha Flight in Deadpool and Wolverine. How do you not do that? How did Ryan Reynolds not go, you know what? We need to see Weapon X. We need to go and we need to see Alpha Flight. I know the problem is that whole movie was a goof, so it probably wasn't the time or place. But if you had asked me and I worked on the script, I would have had Alpha Flight. We'd have the crazy Canucks. How they didn't touch on that, I don't know. You could have dealt with the Weapon X program. I'd love to see. I loved Alpha Flight. The first 24 issues of John Byrne's Alpha Flight, great stuff. Super Terev says, Evans doing Bennett from Commando, right down to the fashion choice, I think a lot of people missed. Gray Man's intent is to homage Commando in 80s movies. Oh, I totally agree with you. It's just it didn't need, if it was gonna be an homage to Commando, did it have to cost $230 million? And I would say probably not. Roz says, what happened to Memory Alpha? Oh, nothing happened to Memory Alpha, Roz. It's just that now Memory Alpha, every new episode of Strange New Worlds comes out, they have to rewrite all of the canonical changes and try and make them jibe. They add what happened into, again, what this article is talking about. One of the things about Star Trek, what made it so fun from 1966 to 2005, was even though it all wasn't perfect, for the most part, you had this great fictional history. Here's what I think one of the great problems of the last 10 years with IP filmmaking has been. I think this is true of Star Wars. I think this is true of Doctor Who. I think it's particularly true of Star Trek, is the people working on this stuff. I mean, yeah, you could say Russell T. Davies is an exception, but they were never particularly interested in the originals in the first place. And they have gone back and they want to make everything. No one's going to go back and pay any attention to Star Trek canon. They're just going to rewrite their own. And the thing is, when they come in, when you look, I didn't ask for them to make 2 prequel series. I didn't ask for them to add all this shit in, like Spock has a sister. Now we're going to meet Cybok. We're going to change things around. Let's do a show about Pike, but let's not have Dr. Boyce. Let's put Kirk in command of the Farragut, but where's Captain Garavik? Who? They don't fucking know. So we'll just make it a new. Well, we know. I read on the internet that Kirk was on the Farragut. Well, yeah, but the Farragut had a Captain Garavik. I didn't read that. Of course you didn't. So who's the captain? Let's make it a Vulcan woman. Okay, but already you're like, you didn't do your work. And I think the real problem that I can't stand watching these is that the people who are in charge of these franchises. One of the things that make any kind of fictional universe, whether it's Game of Thrones, whether it's Doctor Who, especially whether it's Lord of the Rings, when you have all this world building, it's already done for you. But it's very hard you have to do homework. If you're going to, and then they're like, now we'll just make it a prequel. We'll give it a cursory glance. What they've done is they've diminished and denigrated their franchises by not, let's retcon the Timeless Children or whatever. Or retcon Doctor Who. Like, who the fuck are you to do that? And then you're basing it around, well, we have to make it appeal to modern audiences. Why? Make it appeal to you know what makes things appeal to audiences? A great story well told. House of the Dragon. If you want to look at how to deal with the prequel show, House of the Dragon, I mean, season 2 wasn't as successful as season 1 because they finished it too early, but season 1 of House of the Dragon, that definitely added and plussed Game of Thrones. Certainly better than the last season of Game of Thrones. That's the way to do it. Because you had the original creator working on it, and you had the people who Ryan Condal really wanted to do something great and special, and they did. Season 1 of House of the Dragon is terrific. It's beautifully done. The acting is great. Everything works really, really well. It honors what came before. Modern Star Trek is basically all these modern writers, and it's all activist writing, which is gross anyway, because it's going to be horribly dated next week. But yeah, so the people at Memory Alpha are just changing around. Memory Alpha used to be a place where you could go and get real Star Trek history, but now it's been polluted by the bullshit that they've been making. So it's very frustrating to look at, and I hate it. But that's, you've heard that from me. And part of what I wanted to read to you is an article where somebody takes me to task for that. Anonymous says, Rob, I recently picked up the 30-film box set of the classic Universal Monsters. What are your thoughts on those? You really do get lost in them despite their age. Also, I'd love to see you do a conversation about the various Irwin Allen sci-fi series. Look, I love the Universal Monsters. I grew up with them. And again, what's interesting is all of the people that came out of making theater and movies, they were all people of letters. They were all people that read. They had classical educations. They knew that they had a little bit of a flavor of the world. I mean, look at people like Todd Browning, and you have people with, in terms of their sexualities, that they had to hide, and they incorporated them into their movies, but they weren't overt about it. You can talk about what was coded this or coded that, but those movies are movies that were made by smart people. And that's why they work. Even Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein is a pretty good movie. And you go back and you watch those, I mean, there is real artistry and real craft going on. And you're looking at, Frankenstein was made, you're 6 years into the sound age of film, which is incredible. And what they were doing. And those are, I mean, think about it. The Universal Monsters began in the Great Depression pre-World War II. I don't know if the Hays Code had kicked in yet. Maybe. But I mean, those films are incredible. And remember, at the time, they were shocking, too. So I love those movies. Now, in terms of what you were saying about... okay, I grew up watching the Irwin Allen shows. You know, I was never even as a kid, I hated Lost in Space. I thought it was so stupid because I started watching Star Trek when I was 5 years old, and Lost in Space, I was like, I don't like this. It was dumb, but I watched it. You know, Land of the Giants was okay. I liked Land of the Giants. I liked Time Tunnel. I liked watching it, and I did like Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea. But the quality of those shows were not Star Trek. They were not Star Trek. And they were not Twilight Zone, and they were not Outer Limits. And even as a kid, I was a fucking snob. I was a snob. Because I started watching, I saw Planet of the Apes and Star Trek and War of the Worlds when I was 5. And those are my favorite things. And Twilight Zone. And Outer Limits. And that was my jam. Those things alone. War of the Worlds and Planet of the Apes were my favorite. War of the Worlds, I really like War of the Worlds more than Planet of the Apes. But though I'd seen those, I was watching Star Trek, Twilight Zone, and Outer Limits. Now, to be fair, I didn't always love Outer Limits, but I would watch it just for the glimpse of whatever monster they had on. I didn't quite understand everything, and Twilight Zone was kind of the same way, but I loved Twilight Zone because they were only half an hour long. So even if it was boring and I didn't quite understand what was happening, I loved it anyway. So that was, when I was a kid, those were my shows. And I thought the Irwin Allen stuff was kind of, like, I liked Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea. I even built a model of the Seaview when I was a kid. And the Flying Sub, the Aurora models, but I didn't love them because even as a kid, I'm like, these aren't as good, but I like them, And now we're gonna have Akiva Goldsman doing a whole Irwin Allen verse. Oh boy, I can't wait for that. Although there's something that Akiva Goldsman might do something good with, but judging by what he already did with the Lost in Space movie, which was god awful, I don't know. Roz says, so wait, Scotty is in Strange New Worlds is some insecure Glaswegian who can only find his inner brilliance under pressure? I don't think Strange New Worlds knows what an NCO is. Okay, so the Gorn are not only xenomorphs, but they're also interdimensional space prisoners or something? You feel my pain. And you know what? It doesn't have to be this way. But the people writing it don't understand. And by the way, they're just stealing. The worst part is they're just stealing from other things. And everybody, they don't know how. Look, when you have a bunch of people that grow up insecure and worried about their feelings, they can't write heroes. They don't know, and they don't know how to write exceptional people either. The characters, Star Trek is about elite characters, the 99th percentile of people, and you've got a bunch of petty little writers that would rather bring their own politics or their own peccadillos into what they're writing rather than write great characters. They don't know how. They look at Joss Whedon, their favorite show was Buffy and Angel, and that's what they're doing. And that's what they have destroyed. They have destroyed Star Trek to such a degree as to make it, I mean, I don't know if Star Trek has value anymore. Like, I would wonder, like they're talking about, well, we're going to try and make a Star Trek movie. Really? Why would anybody want to go see a Star Trek movie today? What have you done with Star Trek? The only successful Star Trek you have going that people love is your comedy, your Star Trek farce in Lower Decks. Prodigy was a pretty good show, but you killed it before it had time to really catch on. And then we have Discovery and Strange New Worlds. Both shows, great cast. You've got all the money that you need to give it production design. They have no vision, and the writing is awful. It's awful. It's written by the last people in the world that should be writing Star Trek, have been writing Star Trek since 2017. Alex Kurtzman, a man who was proud to say before he wrote Star Trek 09 with Bob Orsi, I'd never seen Star Trek before. J.J. Abrams, I never liked Star Trek, and one of my writers never saw Star Trek, and these are the guys that inherited the Star Trek franchise. What? What kind of clown world are we living in? Why would a corporation give that franchise to people like that? And don't sit there and tell me, everyone's like, well, adjusted for inflation, Rob. I hate this adjustment for inflation bullshit. No, none of those Star Trek movies made money. They never made over $500,000 or $500 million, and they spent way too much on them. Into Darkness, if you believe some reports, between marketing and production costs, we're talking $300 million. Really? For Star Trek? Shit, man. You make a Star Trek movie, you cap that shit at $100 million. And you get somebody great to write it, and you have somebody that knows how to make movies, because you should not be spending infinite amounts of money on that. Super Terev says, are you reading Mark Spears' Monsters, Rob? I am not. I don't know what that is. That a novel or is it a comic? I don't know. I have not been reading that. I usually, comics, I don't read flippers anymore. I only collect hardcovers. Like, I just got the new Fatal Attractions X-Men omnibus, and then I have the Howard Chaykin Black Kiss omnibus coming in, and the Lost Marvels with Chaykin's work coming in. That's my comics for this week. Roz, is it Ross or Roz? Did you see that the actor who played that cyborg in Section 31 asked Kurtzman why the film was that way, and Kurtzman replied that Trek was dying, so it needed to be that way? But surely story is timeless, right? It just felt like it said everything about his regime. No, he doesn't know fuck all. And you know what? Once you're getting in a position where you're making money, you just try and keep making those deals. God only knows. I mean, the idea that they're doing a Starfleet Academy show in the 31st century or 32nd century, I mean, it's so weird that they're going to try and make it contemporary. We're going to school now. We're here to... It's so weird. It's so weird what they're doing. I don't understand it. Rydesano says, we have some damn good shows, Rob. Alien Earth, now Peacemaker 2 Thursday, and The Terminalist, Dark Wolf next, plus new episodes of Foundation. Hey, I've seen 9 of the 10 episodes of this year's Foundation. That show's gotten exponentially better. We got For All Mankind coming, season 5, and hopefully 6, 7, and 8. But yeah, we are getting some good stuff. There's always good stuff. There's a lot of great TV. We've had a lot of great stuff happening, but our old venerable IPs, the problem is, until you get a Tony Gilroy, Star Wars Andor was a masterful piece of work because it was actually about something, and he did a phenomenal job, and everybody that worked on that show did a phenomenal job, and we were lucky to get it. And I want to see more like that. Why don't we have more like that? So you're right. Played Out says, Rob, we don't do science anymore in America. Makes sense that Star Trek would follow suit. Look, I get it. Apparently nobody reads anymore. It's shocking if you look at the new Trump administration. Look, I was willing to give him the benefit of the doubt, but there is an attack on the truth with this new administration, and getting rid of as much science, NOAA, getting rid of all that. It's like, what are we doing? Science drives innovation. STEM drives innovation. Our space program drove innovation. The fact that we decide to defund these things what do we expect? I mean, this dark Enlightenment philosophy that's been thrust on the people of power by our tech bro overlords is not going to work. I mean, we should be moving toward a new age of enlightenment, and we're not. And I don't understand. I don't understand it. It's kind of a weird thing. Well, now I got some letters. I wanted to read to you guys. You can send me a letter. Just remember, put Robservations in the title. A lot of people send me letters. And by the way, if I can just editorialize for a minute, a lot of people have been sending me stuff to read, and I want to be encouraging about all of your work. But like, if you're going to send me a 140 page script about characters from multiple different companies together, what you're saying to me is, and I don't mean to be discouraging, but that is unprofessional. And the fact that you spent 140 pages writing scripts that contain superheroes from multiple universes and multiple owners, I understand that, but that is not the way to go about. That's not what you should be doing. As an exercise, great. And I appreciate that you'd want me to collaborate with you. And if you say you're coming into a lot of money, I'm happy to collaborate with you. But why not? If you're coming into a lot of money and you want to finance something, I'd love to make it with you as something low budget. I also have a true noir project that I actually control and own, a great feature film script from Max Allan Collins, but picking characters that are owned by other companies that you could never get control of is not the way to go about things. And when people send me scripts to read, unless I know you, I can't read your script. From a legal position, I can't read your script. If you're sending me comic books and things like that you're going to publish or that are already published, those I can take a look at. But everybody's sending me their treatments and all this. It's unprofessional to do that. In the industry, what you should do, if you want to contact somebody that's made films or whatever, ask if their company has a release form and do they have a submission policy for unsolicited material, meaning it's not coming from an agency. So that's just an aside. This first letter comes to us from Curtis Joseph. I watched this past Friday on digital media, James Gunn's Superman, and found at the end of it, saying to myself when the initial credits rolled up on the screen, meh. Well, that was something I certainly won't be watching again. Frankly, I thought it was an okay film for what it was. I agree this was a very different live-action Superman that the world has never seen before on the silver screen, and as well one for the better going forward for the DC Universe. The day before, I'd watched Deadpool and Wolverine for the first time, and I very much enjoyed it more than Superman 2005, and considered The Merc with a Mouth, the second sequel, to be a good throwaway film to paying great respect to the legacy of the long-ago past 20th Century Fox Marvel films. Question: do you have an interest to see the sequel to Sisu, which releases in North America on November 21st, 2025? It is officially titled Sisu: Road to Revenge. I'm surprised there has not been any release trailers for it as of the present. I will be buying next month a paperback copy of The Metamorphosis of Prime Intellect and the graphic novel Superman Up in the Sky. Your thoughts on everything? Stay classy, Curtis J. Yeah, I mean, Superman is a very divisive film. I mean, I enjoyed it because it reminded me of mid-'80s Justice League comics. But I understand everybody's complaints, and I think that there was a 2.5 or 3 hour movie there that would have been much more satisfying for people, but they were trying to keep it to, and we've seen clips of it, and I would really like to see, I wish they would release a director's cut of the film. Maybe they will. I don't know. Sisu, which the Finnish movie, I can't wait to see. The first movie was awesome. Any movie where they kill Nazis in that way, it was brutal, it was hilarious, it was really well made. I loved it. I can't wait to see the sequel. The Metamorphosis of Prime Intellect. You're going to get a kick out of that, let me tell you. And in terms of Superman Up in the Sky, I don't know. Are you sure it's Superman Up in the Sky? I don't know that right away. Is it All-Star Superman? Is it Superman for All Seasons? Superman Up in the Sky? I don't have that, and I haven't read it. So I could be wrong with that. I don't know. But, like you say, I mean, Deadpool and Wolverine, to me, Deadpool and Wolverine was kind of a lark. I was expecting, like, an actual, real, thoughtful movie. The whole thing was a joke, and it was fine. I didn't buy it. I don't own it. I used to buy every MCU movie. I love Deadpool 1, and I really like Deadpool 2. I have no reason to watch Deadpool and Wolverine again. Because it was, you watch Logan, and it has a story to tell that you can really get into. But Deadpool and Wolverine was kind of a one-and-done movie for me. But it was a lot of fun. I enjoyed it. Let's see, James Howie. James Howie says, hello, Rob. This is James Howie, a.k.a. Shonen Kaiju, on the channel. I've been meaning to write you a letter for a while, but it's been hard to pin down what to write about in these crazy and interesting times. I decided to touch on the rise of Asian entertainment in America and how it is usurping our stale and infantilized culture right before our very eyes. It's fitting for the AI-like abomination that is the Electric State to fall flat on its face while K-pop demon hunters soar to create a new franchise because it has so much heart and soul put into it. There's a big reason why so many have drifted towards anime as well. Get ready for Demon Slayer to do around 30 million plus opening weekend, and I think the Chainsaw Man movie will also do well in October. People want authenticity and authorship in art, and Asian storytelling is giving that to them where Hollywood often is not. Death Stranding 2. I frequently visit the manga section at Barnes & Noble, and I see a diverse range of people from different walks of life. Young Americans are a big part of the consumption of Asian culture, but they're certainly not alone. Netflix just recently paid 50% of their worldwide users. Netflix just recently said 50% of their worldwide users now watch anime. Look, one of the best things I've seen in years was I didn't catch up with 2023's Pluto, but if you like science fiction and you like some of the ideas about artificial intelligence and what's going on in alien Earth, I recommend everybody watch Pluto. It's 8-hour-long episodes. It's on Netflix. It's fucking fantastic. I mean, it is, remember, it's anime. And yes, I know it's connected to a certain other anime, but the way it's if you don't know that, go in cold, watch Pluto. It's unbelievable. One Piece manga recently passed Batman as the second most copies sold and is right on Superman's heels. Pokemon is the highest grossing media franchise in the history of mankind, despite being around for less than 20 years. And people are still collecting Pokemon cards. It's still huge. I'm not big into K-pop, but that is also huge with millennials and especially Gen Z. It's like you said on John Campia's show, comparing the Beatles in the 60s to the Asian invasion. Also, did you see that the Monster anime is getting a Blu-ray release here in America next year? Ooh, I did not. The Mobile Suit Gundam, the Origin manga, is getting a deluxe edition release as well. I saw that. I also saw that the 4K release of... I also saw the release of Shin Godzilla in the theater this weekend, and I can't wait for the Angel's Egg 4K release in November, right around my birthday. It's a glorious time to be a weeb. Thanks again for your wisdom, knowledge, and insight, Rob. Well, I'll tell you. The thing about Asian science, I've been a fan of Asian science fiction since I was a little kid, whether it was kaiju movies or movies like the Mysterians and Gorath and Matango, you know, the Green Slime, even Chinese science fiction like Inframan or the Super Inframan. And there is a totally different sensibility at work. And what you're getting is genuine. Sure, is Godzilla a corporate creation? Yeah. But when you get the guy who created Evangelion directing a Godzilla movie, you're doing okay. You know, and with Godzilla, they've allowed, Godzilla GMK, man, that movie kicks ass. And then you've got the Showa era, the High Sea era, the Millennium era. I mean, there's so many good. The Japanese science fiction, while it's not always, if you talk to 1001 Johnny, who's the biggest Ultraman fan in the world, and Ultra 7 and all of those things, I like Kamen Rider, and you see all of that, it's all genuine. You feel like you're getting something that has authorship in it, especially manga. I grew up reading manga when Viz Communications started publishing manga in the 80s. I was not aware. I got to read things like Area 88, which was a jet fighter manga, on the heels of Top Gun. I was reading Kamui. I was reading 1001 Nights. Was it 2001 Nights? It's 2001 Nights. Of course, Akira, which I have the movie and I've got the box set of manga. Lone Wolf and Cub. I'd seen Shogun Assassin, but I'd never read the manga until First Comics started publishing it here with the Frank Miller covers. So getting manga is I think there's a genuine sensibility that's something new and unique. Our civilization here in America has been way too corporatized, and it used to be that the studios would make movies. It was still the filmmakers in charge. In the 40s and 50s, but you still had filmmakers, even contract players like Michael Curtiz or somebody. Casablanca was supposed to be some pot boiler movie, like almost a throwaway. Then it turns out to be one of the greatest movies ever made because you had people that were able to inject themselves into it. You still need the art, but when movies cost $200 million, you have to mitigate your risks, which is unfortunate. So people don't get. We don't get. Manga. It's one guy usually, or maybe it's somebody making, like, look at Death Stranding, look at the Metal Gear Solid. You've got a visionary making video games, and everybody knows him. Kojima-san is the man. or Kojima. But no, Kojima-san's the man, and you're getting something when you play his games. It's like, wow, this is something. I mean, even though tons of people are working on those games, I mean, when you get Death Stranding is a weird fucking franchise, but when you play those games, I mean, you realize they're coming out of the one guy's imagination, and that's what we want: authorship, authenticity in our entertainment, and that's it. And here, you know, I don't think the Japanese, they'll make use of AI and all the tools at their disposal, but I don't think that the Japanese, their sense of honor, I think people would not be so quick to be churning out AI-generated comics and passing them off. I think the thing about the Japanese is, look, the Japanese still have respect for the kind of paper you make boxes out of for your Blu-rays and 4Ks. Packaging matters. Paper matters to the Japanese. So I think that, there's a reason that we're getting these things, because they are genuine. Yeah, you could say that K-pop is kind of a corporate product, but it's an interesting corporate product. So I think that's pretty cool. Andy Montmayor says, I would like a remake of Bad Day at Black Rock. John Sturgis. Spencer Tracy. What a great movie that is. I don't want a remake of that, though. Come on. Do you really want a remake of that? Do you? Do we need one? I would like to. Just watch the original again. It's so good. And by the way, on the Criterion Laserdisc, John Sturgis does commentary. I got to give a shout out to Mary Forrest for giving me that Laserdisc. A Bad Day at Black Rock. And it's great. So, yeah. Well, listen, everybody. I think I'm going to bring this episode of Robservations to a close. I want to thank everybody for being here. This has been a lot of fun. John JM says, Rob, for the Max Allan Collins script you mentioned, how much of a budget would be required to turn it into a film? Well, that's a good question. So first of all, for those of you who don't know, when we started the True Noir project, and if you want to, one of the things I would say to people, I could not sit here and talk mad shit about other people's work if I wasn't doing my own work that I felt could be judged just as harshly, if you wanted to judge it just as harshly. But that's why I teamed up with the Mystery Writers of America Grandmaster Max Allan Collins to do our project. So what we did was, for those of you who don't know, our audio drama was designed to be proof of concept for what could be a series of movies or hopefully a TV series. So for those of you who don't know, our audio drama, the audio drama that I produced and directed, that you can go get at truenoir.co, that you're probably sick to death of hearing clips from by now, is a 10-chapter, total of 4.5 hour story. It is an adaptation of the first of Max Allan Collins' Nathan Heller novels. The conceit behind Nathan Heller's books is that Nathan Heller and the characters around him are fictitious, like his immediate family, but he gets involved in actual historical events. So everything that's happening in these mysteries he's involved in are based on real history and real people. And they're meticulously researched, but Max chose things where the conclusions of what history thinks happened might not have happened that way. So Max has found a way to go into real history and offer an alternative point of view. Kind of like something like what Oliver Stone did with JFK. But in Max's case, he takes his character, Nathan Heller, and gets them involved in various things. And the Assassination of Anton Cermak, which is based on the first Nathan Heller book, True Detective, we couldn't use that title because HBO took it. Plus, I think it's too generic. So we came up with the idea of True Noir, which is noir detective. It's noir fiction, but it's truthful in the sense that it's all about historical events. So the first story that we adapted tells the tale of Nathan Heller getting involved in various factions. A Democratic mayor has taken power, Anton Cermak, in Chicago, right after Al Capone has been jugged, put into jail for tax evasion, as you saw in a movie like The Untouchables. That all really happened. And Frank Nitti, who dies in The Untouchables, that did not happen, but Frank Nitti has taken over the outfit, which is what the mob in Chicago was called at the time. And we're talking circa 1932 and 1933. So there's a new administration in Chicago, and Anton Cermak has vowed to fight crime. And Anton Cermak, with his goon squad, his cops that work for him, made an attempt on Frank Nitti's life. Tried to kill Frank Nitti and destroy the Chicago outfit. Well, based on that, in real life, the mayor of Chicago was in fact assassinated. He was assassinated in Miami at a rally for Franklin Delano Roosevelt, the newly elected FDR. He went down there trying to curry favor with FDR because he didn't exactly support FDR the way he probably should have. So in real life, Anton Cermak went to Miami and he was gunned down. And Nathan Heller gets involved in this milieu. And Nathan Heller runs across Frank Nitti's path. He runs across other gangsters of the day's path. He runs across movie stars like George Raft. There are all kinds of historical players. And basically, it's Nathan Heller's first. He goes from being a police officer. Something happens to him, so he leaves the force and he becomes a detective. And I like to call it Nathan Heller's coming-of-age story. Well, so Max Allan Collins wrote books that cover, there's 19 Nathan Heller novels and some novellas. And the Heller novels go from 1932 to the late 60s. And there's 19 of them. Our movie, the Nathan Heller film, is called True Noir, Dying in the Post-War World. And it is set in 1947. And this is a true story. In Chicago, there was a series of, serial killings called the Lipstick Murders, because at one of the murder scenes, the killer used lipstick and wrote something to the effect of, "Stop me before I kill again." And at the same time, a young girl, a little girl, has gone missing, was apparently kidnapped right from the second story of her own house in Chicago. And the movie deals with Nathan Heller getting involved in this case. And it's all true. Nathan Heller's fictitious, but the story is actually very Lynchian. It takes some very David Lynchian turns. And Max wrote a phenomenal script. It's a great script. And I want to direct it, of course. Max wrote it. And, I mean, look, to do a period piece correctly, and by the way, we'd shoot the whole thing probably in and around Rock Island, Illinois, where there's 30% tax credits for production and for post, and we might shoot a little bit in Iowa, which also now has tax credits. And what I'd like to do is, after Dick Wolf wraps his shows, we want to shoot this in April, if we could find the money. And I would say, look, you could do this movie for cheap. Really cheap, actually. But you're competing, you'd want to probably, I'd love to get it onto a streaming service. I'd love to make it, look, I think somewhere between $10 and $20 million. And that's a big ask, considering I've only directed one movie. But I would say, listen to the audio drama, and our audio drama has a movie-like cast. We've got Academy Award nominees. We've got Emmy nominees. Barry Bostwick is in it. Anthony LaPaglia plays Al Capone. And, of course, Max Allan Collins wrote Road to Perdition, which the movie was based on. He wrote the graphic novel that was published by DC that they based the movie on. They didn't want anyone to know it was a graphic novel. We've got David Strathairn playing Frank Nitti. You've got Vincent Pastore from The Sopranos, Bill Sadler, who's been in everything from our own movie, The Hills Run Red. He was the villain in Die Hard 2. He was Death in Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey. Billy Mooney, from Lost in Space. He plays a doctor. The cat Louis Lombardi, who you'll remember from 24 and The Sopranos. The cast is incredible. We have 25 great actors. Katie Sackhoff plays a love interest. Our own Chris Carr is in it. I'm really proud of it. The film has 4 hours of original music, original score. I mixed it. I said, I want to make this sound like it's a movie. So there's the hard sell on True Noir. But to answer your question, probably somewhere between 10 and 20, because it is a period piece. And the problem is, look, you can make movies like Together with Dave Franco and his wife, that movie. But if you're making a period piece and a detective story, you have to make it at least on par with what you're seeing on a streaming series now. And, your streaming shows, your normal how much they're spending. You got to think how much they're spending on an hour of a standard. Like, how much does an episode of Bosch cost? And in our case, in Bosch, you can amortize the cost because you have a season's worth. We're having a movie that's set in 1947. It's a period piece. And while we could keep the costs down, it has a pretty big sprawling cast. And like with the audio drama, we would cast the movie with a lot of great actors. And I really do. And a lot of people, the first thing, let's say somebody was going to give us, let's just assume that somebody was going to give us $20 million or $15 million to make the True Noir movie. The first thing they'd want to do is replace me as the director. The next thing that they would want to do is get rid of Michael Rosenbaum as your lead. They're like, can't you have a more bankable lead? Michael Rosenbaum was so good as Nathan Heller, and he's the perfect age to play Heller. And what I want to do is use the movie as a backdoor pilot to do the series. And then we want to do like 4 or 5 books, which is what streaming wants. And we could do all of the Nathan Heller books set in the 1960s. So you've got all the cultural revolution that was going on in the 60s, plus you have all the Martin Luther King, you've got Marilyn Monroe, you've got the Kennedy bros, you've got everything that was going on, and that's where the series would live. And you've got 19 books, soon to be 20. It's an incredible package. And I think we could really pull it off, and that's what we're looking for right now is financing. And we've got the material, we've got the talent. And if you listen to the audio drama, you can see how much thought has already been put into the series and where we would go. And Max Allan Collins, he wrote all the episodes of the audio drama. He adapted his own material, and his screenplay is excellent. And it really is, I think, a terrific script. And I would really love to do it because I've always loved detective fiction. And even though I only directed one movie, a comedy that I can't even get from the executive producer to put it out in 4K, it's been out of print for 20 years. I really want to do this movie. It's like my life's calling to make True Noir, and it's something that we own. So that's a long story to answer your question, but that's kind of what we'd like to do. And again, we are talking to some heavy hitters, so we'll see where it all goes. And on that note, everyone, our White Devils movie is coming, though, and I'm working on that. That was a micro-budget film based on a South African playwright, Raza DeWitt's story, Deep Grond, and we have that coming out, and I'm working on doing an internet premiere. Maybe forewalling it in theaters, but it's the same team that brought you Tango Shalom, a.k.a. Forbidden Tango. So we did that. We have that coming, but I think I'm going to do an internet premiere. We'll have to charge for it, but I was going to have it done earlier this month, but we had to redo the sound mix because we had to pull a song out of it. So I'm supposed to get the new sound mix on Friday. Fingers crossed, so then we can marry it to picture. I can QC it, and then I'll have the version of the movie. I thought the movie was done. Movies are never done. And on that note, everybody, I want to thank everybody for generously supporting this channel via Super Chats and tips. I want to thank everybody for your continued patronage and membership. Thank you so much. We're going to have a member call this weekend. And, of course, I'll be back on the John Campea show tomorrow. I'll probably be back, if not tomorrow night, then the next night, hopefully with some scintillating things to discuss. And, again, if you want to send me a letter, please put Robservations in the title. And the last thing I want to mention is the short story contest for the Imagination Connoisseurs short story contest. One of our viewers, and like I've told people, because we live in this AI world, the short story contest is going to have a very steep entry fee. If you've already sent in, we were going to do this years ago, we didn't do it. If you've already sent in your story, you're already good. We've got it's under consideration. But if you want to enter the short story contest, and we're going to start at the beginning of September, end of this month. The entry fee is $50, and the reason it's $50, people are going to balk at that, is because I don't want people to just generate stories via AI and send them to me. So 10,000 words or less. The book is going to be called The Imagination Connoisseurs, and I want stories that either appeal to imagination connoisseurs, explain what is an imagination connoisseur, talks about how does one become an imagination connoisseur, but it's going to be an anthology book. It's a dream of mine to have edited an anthology. I've wanted to do it my whole life. So we're going to have the short story competition, and then we will crowdfund the actual book itself, which I want to be a hardcover, slipcase version, paperback version, and a digital version. So, but I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to launch the crowdfunding campaign until all the perks are done for True Noir. So we're going to start the contest, and it's going to run from September through December 31st of this year. Then we'll probably launch the crowdfunding campaign for the book soon after, and we're going to be informing people as we go, as I get in stories. So I'm still working on the rule book, the rules that we have to follow, because there's legalities. And oh, by the way, so we want, for those of you wondering, if you submit a story to the book, part of it is we're no dummies. We want to own first right of refusal. Well, we want to own your story for 5 years, and because we want to, hopefully, if there's movies to be made or something, we would retain those rights. But then after 5 years, all the rights to your story revert back to you. So that would be. I hope people are okay with that. Some people probably won't be. But hey, why do this if you can't have an upside? I want to be like Reese Witherspoon, man. Look what she did with her book club and all that. She was publishing books, making deals and doing very well that way. I don't know if we're going to be able to do that, but hey, why not? So I'll tell you more about that later. But if you're interested in being a writer, or you've always wanted to be, and one of our viewers submitted $50, and so the first, when we open up the contest, somebody is going to have their story paid for. So I thought that was pretty cool. I never thought about that, but if anybody wants to cover somebody else's entry fee, we have one already, and I thought that was really neat. I didn't even think about doing that, and somebody just sent it to me and said, this is for somebody else to submit their story. And I'm like, that's like the coolest thing ever. So there you go. And that money is going to go directly to professional editors to actually look at your stories, and we'll probably have you work with, if we choose your story, you'll be able to work with a professional editor and get some real decent feedback on your story. So there you go. And on that note, I want to thank my moderating staff, Tom Jr. Jackson, Darth Plato, everybody else. Darth Plato sent me an interesting article, or an interesting letter as well. I just didn't think it was appropriate for this show, but I'll probably read it on the next show. So thank you for that. And remember, every person you meet has a story to tell that you have yet to hear, and all you have to do is listen. And with that, I say to all of you, have a better night.